Tralanga telepathy and wing function. Hello, my disciples. Today we'll be going over the telepathic abilities and the wings of the Tralanga species. But before we get into it, I just need to say we have a Discord for those interested in the Tralanga lore. Link to it in the description. And with that, now we can begin. Starting with the telepathic abilities of the Tralanga, this comes from specialized rings of neurons in the brain that can send out and pick up on specific radio signals, said rings of neurons being located near the language center of the brain. This ability evolved from a special member of their closed circulatory, early arthropod ancestors, whose antenna was able to sense electrical impulses from the muscle movements of prey, and later developed the release of electrical pulses to communicate silently over a long distance, which over time evolved into radio signals. And this ability migrated into the brain itself, growing more powerful as they became more intelligent. On a related note, the Deep Ones on page 88 of the Gospel lost this ability after they split off from the Tralanga, as the deep or rich caves they lived in would nullify this ability, making it useless. Also, Tralanga telepathy comes in two forms: Tralanga to Tralanga, which we just went over, and Tralanga to non-Tralanga. In the case of Tralanga to non-Tralanga, a specialized device must be used, known as a broadcaster, which is basically a radio sensing microphone, long-distance brain scanner, and radio emitter. It will pick up the telepathic signals of the Tralanga, teleport electrons into the target's brain to stimulate the audio-sensory parts, creating sound, and reads what they're thinking, sending that back to the user, allowing for back-and-forth communication via Tralanga telepathy. With that, we can now move on to the wings. The wings themselves will be explained in four parts: the power system, the inner wing, the flight mechanism, and how this ability evolved. Starting with part 1, we have the power system. Inside the Tralanga body is an organ known as the charge organ, which lays along the spine inside the abdomen. This organ will release electrical energy depending on demand, by flexing specialized muscles in sequence, similar to how an electric eel produces electricity, but slower, controlled, and much weaker, as the actual flight mechanism does not need much actual voltage to work. This allows the charge organ to produce a steady, consistent, long-lasting flow of electrical energy, allowing the average Tralanga to fly for around 5 hours. But this can be increased with training and a proper diet, as the muscles that power this organ are powered by the body's fat reserves. Moving on to part 2, we have the actual wings and their internals. As you can see here, this is the inside of the wing. Two long nerves run to the tip of the wing, form a coil around this special curved metal rod in the wing tip, which I will explain in part 3. And you can see how the wings are attached to the body via the scapula, secondary scapula, and their internal muscle systems. Also, these two long nerves are special. They're highly specialized to withstand large amounts of voltage, similar to the second spinal cable, but not to the same extent as they aren't for handling such levels of voltage. Moving on to part 3, we have the actual mechanism of the flight itself. Inside the tip of the wing, this curved metal rod is how it happens. This metal rod is made of a unique form of iron from the Tralanga home realm that only partially conforms to the known laws of physics. This type of semi-physics conforming element is known as a deviated element, and in this case, we're looking at a sub-type of iron known as propulsion iron. When currents from the nerves run through the coil, this generates a magnetic field, which would normally act as a motor, but in propulsion iron, this instead creates a physical outwards force, which is all focused to a singular point by the curve in the rod, creating what is basically a magnetic thruster, allowing them to fly. And lastly, moving on to part 4, how this ability evolved. During the evolution of their ancestors' antenna and the development of its telepathic abilities, they also developed the ability to release a burst of powerful electrical energy to stun predators and warn others of danger, which became powerful enough to propel them over a long distance via the absorption of propulsion iron. This led to them specializing into having two sets of antennae, the sensing ones, which would later become part of the brain, and long limb-like ones, which would migrate to the spine and develop into the wings they have now. And with that, we have covered the Tralanga telepathic abilities and wings. I would like to go further into what deviated elements are, but they deserve their own video, as they are quite the interesting topic. But anyway, my disciples, that brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this, leaving a like and sharing is appreciated. And with that, see you all in the next video.